Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. Maronite Patriarch Bashar Boutros-Sarraei urges opposing parties in Lebanon to reconcile for the sake of the Lebanese. Gulf Cooperation Council ministers say Hezbollah's involvement in Syria is obstructing efforts for a political resolution to the conflict in the country. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's marathon efforts to draw Israel and the Palestinians back to direct negotiations failed to achieve any breakthrough. Intermittent sniper fire has left one person injured in the northern city of Tripoli. The national news agency says Mohammed Abdul Ibrahim, a resident of the neighborhood of Jabal Mahsin, was wounded in the leg when sniper fire between the area and Al-Baqa broke out. The attack led to tension in the other trouble spots in the city despite calm. It also limited traffic in the different areas that regularly witness clashes. The Lebanese Army Command said a soldier died this morning after he succumbed to injuries he had sustained in clashes in Tripoli. Tripoli regularly suffers from deadly gun battles linked to the fighting in Syria. The Alawite neighborhood of Jabal Mahsin backs Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, while Babet Tabane supports the revolution against him. Maronite Patriarch Bashar Boutros-Sarraei says that reconciliation in Lebanon is of paramount importance. Sarraei says politicians and opposing sects should reconcile for the sake of the Lebanese people. He added they should reconcile for the sake of the disruption they are causing through their continuous disputes, whether in the constitutional institutions or the general aspect of life. The Maronite official also slams the political cover-ups plaguing the country and perpetrated by those enjoying the powers of money and weapons. Lebanon has been facing political and security crisis as its opposing political forces disagree over the formation of a new government and the implementation of a new electoral law, and as sectarian armed clashes spread across the country. Gulf Cooperation Council ministers say Hezbollah's involvement in Syria is obstructing efforts for a political resolution to the conflict in the war-torn country, while expressing concern over the repercussions of Syria's crisis on Lebanon's stability. In a meeting held in Manama, Bahrain, over the weekend, ministers said Hezbollah's continued involvement in Syria hindered holding another conference to restore peace. The attendees called for putting an end to the interference of Hezbollah's militia in Syria under the banner of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. GCC ministers reiterated their call for the Lebanese state to abide by the dissociation policy towards events in Syria. GCC members are expected to meet next week in Riyadh to discuss how to impose sanctions on Hezbollah members after deciding to crack down on people affiliated with the group of the Gulf countries. Hezbollah Deputy Chief Sheikh Naim Qasim accuses the Future movement of standing behind the latest clashes that left scores of casualties in the southern city of Sidon. Qasim says the instigation against the army and the encouragement of the strife have led to the Sidon clashes. He said, and I quote, "Hadn't it been for the Future movement, civil peace and stability wouldn't have been hit. Around 18 soldiers and more than 20 fighters were killed in 2 days of clashes between Salafist cleric Sheikh Ahmed al-Asir's supporters and the army last Sunday." On another note, Qasim reiterated the call for the formation of a national unity government that works for a consolidation of civil peace and stability based on the Army-People Resistance formula. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State William Burns is scheduled to hold talks with Lebanese officials in Beirut a few days after postponing his trip. Burns was expected to meet with President Michel Sleiman on Thursday and Friday, as well as with Speaker Nabih Berri, Prime Minister Najib Mikati, PM-designate Tamam Slam, Progressive Socialist Party Chief Walid Jumblat, and several March 14 alliances. Burns postponed his trip for accompanying Secretary of State John Kerry, who was shuttling back and forth between Jerusalem and Amman in his bid to revive long-dormant Middle East peace talks. And Nahar Daily says that Burns will stress the importance of adopting the policy of dissociation from the Syrian war and the rejection of the involvement of any Lebanese party in the crisis. The website of Falange MP Nadim Jmayel has been hacked, and a video showing the clash between the bodyguards and activists was posted on it. A statement which says, "Lock out your dogs," appeared under the video addressing Jmayel. On Friday, Jmayel said his convoy attacked by angry protesters opposed to the extension of the parliament's term. Jmayel said a crowd of angry people in Ashafir groundlessly attacked his convoy with sticks, stones and tomatoes. The crowd NGO Nasawiya activists, a feminist collective, have slammed the lawmaker, saying his bodyguards attacked them in a militia-like act. The NGO also accused Jumayel of playing the role of the victim. Syrian army airstrikes in the central city of Homs have killed 3 civilians as regime forces press forward with a new bid to retake several rebel-controlled districts. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says regime forces also carried out heavy shelling of the districts of Khaldiye and the Old City. Observatory Director Rami Abdulrahman said at least 3 civilians, a woman and 2 children were killed in the airstrikes in the Old City, and that dozens of people had been injured since the army assault began on Saturday. He added the army was continuing its attempt to enter Khaldiye, but it hasn't succeeded so far. On Saturday, the group said regime forces were engaged in unprecedented bombardments of several parts of Homs, including Khaldiye, Bab Houd, Hamdiye, and Bustan al-Diwan. A security source in Damascus confirmed fierce fighting was underway in Homs. Still to come, U.S. President Barack Obama arrives in Cape Town ahead of a visit to Robben Island, the jail in which Nelson Mandela was kept for 18 years. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thousands of opponents of Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi have gathered in Cairo's Tahrir Square and outside the presidential palace ahead of a planned mass protest, a game aimed at forcing the president out of office. Crowds of pro- and anti-government protesters grew in the capital on the first anniversary of the inauguration of the country's first democratically elected president. Thousands of people opposed to President Mohamed Morsi have already rallied in Cairo's Tahrir Square, calling for him to resign, while the president's supporters have vowed to defend his legitimacy to the end, leading to fears of confrontation. The anti-Morsi protests are being organized by a grassroots campaign calling itself Tamarud, meaning rebellion, which claims to have collected signatures from 22 million Egyptians demanding the president's ouster. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's marathon efforts to draw Israel and the Palestinians back to direct negotiations has failed to achieve any breakthrough, despite 4 days of talks. A top Palestinian official said it was a positive and profound meeting with President Mahmoud Abbas, but there is still a gap between the Palestinian and Israeli positions. The statement came in shortly after Kerry wrapped up a 5th peace brokering visit to the region. After 6 hours of overnight talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem, Kerry drove out to see Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the nearby West Bank city of Ramallah. Kerry was keen to get fresh peacemaking underway before the UN General Assembly, which has already granted de facto recognition to a Palestinian state, convenes in September. British Prime Minister David Cameron meets Pakistani Premier Nawaz Sharif in Islamabad, Pakistan, to discuss bilateral, regional and international issues. Officials say Cameron, who arrived in Pakistan on Saturday, made an unannounced visit to Afghanistan on the same day, backing talks with the Taliban after his top general said the West missed a chance to strike a peace deal 10 years ago. He held talks with Pakistani President Asif Ali Zardari, focusing on the Afghan peace process, economic cooperation between Britain and Pakistan, and other matters of mutual interest were also discussed during the talks. A presidential spokesman said the president welcomed effort being made to find a peaceful solution to the long-drawn conflict in Afghanistan. He expressed the hope that the efforts made will also take into account legitimate concerns of all the stakeholders. U.S. President Barack Obama paying homage on a visit to South Africa to the man he calls his personal hero and an inspiration to the world, visits the cell on Robben Island, where anti-apartheid leader Nelson Mandela spent 18 years of his life. Aboard Air Force One prior to arriving in South Africa, Obama paid tribute to Mandela for the way he led his nation out of apartheid after years of struggle, but said he did not need a photo op with the former president. The U.S. presidential aircraft touched down at the Cape Town airport in South Africa as part of Obama's second stop of a 3-nation Africa tour. Foreign ministers from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations kick off a series of meetings in Brunei to discuss key economic and political issues in the Asia-South Pacific region. 10-member ASEAN hopes to reach a legally binding code of conduct to manage maritime conduct in disputed areas in the South China Sea, which is claimed by some Asian countries as well as China. The foreign ministers' meeting will be followed by the ASEAN Regional Forum that includes China, Japan, South Korea, the the United States, Russia, and several other countries. The main topics of conversation during their meeting are likely to be Syria and the former American spy agency contractor Edward Snowden. And now for news around the world in brief. An explosion has ripped through a market, killing at least 15 people in Pakistan's city's Peshawar. Officials said 30 more were injured in the blast. Local media say an explosive-laden vehicle was used to carry out the blast and was detonated remotely. No one has claimed responsibility for the bombing. Somali money transfer businesses have asked the British government to stop Barclays Bank from closing their accounts in Britain. Officials and bankers say the move threatens remittances, which millions of Somalis depend on. Remittances from Somalia's diaspora make up about a fifth of households' income in the Horn of Africa nation. Somalia's central bank says Somalis in Britain have sent an estimated $500 million home this year, a vital stream of funds. More than 170 people were treated for heat-related ailments, and some towns and cities took emergency steps to protect the homeless and elderly as the west of the U.S. sweltered in dangerous near-record temperatures. Extreme heat enveloped most of California and Nevada, parts of southern Arizona, as a large high-pressure system trapped hot air across the area. Afternoon temperatures reached at least 48 Celsius in Phoenix. Choosing a present for any newborn baby can be tricky at the best of times, so imagine how difficult it must be for people trying to pick up a special little gift for a prince or princess, especially if you're a courtier trying to impress Britain's Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Prince William and Kate's baby is expected in the middle of July, and soon baby gifts will be arriving at Kensington Palace. For those who can't make up their mind about what to buy, a luxury retailer and silversmith has come up with a solution which will cost $83,700. This giant silver bear bank is capable of holding a very large amount of cash. He's the only one of his kind in the shop, and only 5 will ever be made. A toy which has remained a firm favorite for centuries in the rocking horse, and as this egg cup shows, it's never too soon to get in the saddle. Like the silver bear, this rocking elephant is a limited edition. In fact, so far it's a one-off, and before you pack this trunk, you have to find $130,900. Lebanese composer and oud player Marcel Khalifi, often called the Bob Dylan of the Middle East, performs at London's Barbican Centre as part of the Shubak Festival, highlighting contemporary Arab culture. Declared Artist for Peace in 2005 by the UNESCO, Khalifi has always worked to give full voice to the joys and heartbreaks of a fraught region like the Middle East, never being afraid to make music even in the face of war. And his performances in the bombed-out concert halls in his native Lebanon are a statement to that. Khalifi says his inspiration doesn't just come from the poems, but from many sources such as life, nature, people, and love.
Marcel is important for us and for the region because his songs represent for us the necessity to fight dictatorship and to fight for peace in the region.
If you read Mahmoud Darwish, you know his work, what he writes, and then you hear it by the voice of Marcel Khalifi. It's like, it's amazing, like diversity between the words and the voice. It's really beautiful.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now here's a recap of our headlines. Maronite Patriarch Bashar Boutros Sarrahi urges opposing parties in Lebanon to reconcile for the sake of the Lebanese. Gulf Cooperation Council ministers say Hezbollah's involvement in Syria is obstructing efforts for a political resolution to the conflict in the country. And finally, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's marathon efforts to draw Israel and the Palestinians back to the direct negotiations failed to achieve any breakthrough. Those were your Sunday headlines from Future Television, live from Beirut. Catch us again tomorrow, same time, for more updates. Have a great evening.